Okay, so in this video, we're gonna do the upper extremity, so of the appendicular skeleton. And so come on over here and let's start off with the clavicle. We have the clavicle here, and if you look at it, you've got two ends. You've got the end here that connects to the sternum, that's called the sternal end, and then you have this flatter end here, okay, that connects to the acromion of the scapula, and this is called the acromial end. And so when we look at like the AC joint, the acromioclavicular joint, this is the portion of the clavicle that makes up the acromioclavicular joint. And if you look, if we go around here, you've got this little bump here. That is called the conoid tubercle. Now, how do we know which clavicle this is? Well, this part goes lateral, but really this is gonna help us. This little bump, it's on the posterior aspect of the clavicle, so we gotta put that on the back side. It also faces downward. And so that tells me this is a right clavicle, okay? Let's go ahead and look at the scapula. For the scapula, let's figure out side first. This is the fossa or the cavity that the humerus is gonna fit into, so that has to be lateral, right? Because we're gonna plug into there. Then, this is the spine of the scapula, that has to go on the posterior side. So if we take this, we put it on the lateral. We take this, we put it posterior. What do we have? We have a left scapula here, okay? So let's go ahead and go over this guy. This cavity or fossa is called the glenoid cavity or glenoid fossa. You have a border coming down. If I know this is on the lateral side, this is the lateral border of the scapula, which makes this the medial border of the scapula. As I said, this is the spine of the scapula. And if we go below the spine in here, we have what's called the infraspinous fossa. And then above the spine, we have the supraspinous fossa. And if you get this little extension of bone off of the spine right here, that's actually the acromion. We talked about the AC joint, right? This is the portion that connects to the clavicle to complete the acromioclavicular joint, okay? If we look at this side, let's see if I went over everything there, yeah. If we look at this side, you have a fossa in here. Now that's below the scapula if we're going from the outside in, so this is called the subscapular fossa. And then you have this bony structure, it's on the opposite side of the glenoid cavity from the acromion. This is called the coracoid process. And that should take care of all the structures for the scapula. Now, we have the humerus. Now, the head's got to plug into the cavity, right? So the head is going to be the medial side, right? Because it's going to plug in. And so that's got to be the medial aspect of the bone. Then we go down here, you've got a little fossa and a bigger fossa. The bigger fossa, where your elbow goes into, that is going to go to the back. So we put that in the back, we put this on the medial side, and we've got ourselves a left humerus, okay? Now let's go through the structures here. We have the head of the humerus here, and the neck is not as well visualized, but if we ran a line right underneath the head, that would be called the anatomical neck of the humerus. We have a surgical neck, which would come straight across here. It's a surgical neck of the humerus. And then we've got, see this little groove here? This is called the intertubercular groove or intertubercular sulcus. We could also even call that the bicipital groove. And so it's between tubercles. The tubercle on the medial side of that groove is called the lesser tubercle. The tubercle on the lateral side is called the greater tubercle. Now, if we go to somewhere around mid-shaft, okay, so we look at the shaft, we go about mid-shaft, and we look at the lateral side, this is called the deltoid. It's not very well visualized on this, but it's called the deltoid tuberosity. Remember, the deltoid muscle is going to be lateral. It's going to insert into the humerus. So right on the lateral side, about mid-shaft, okay? If we come down to the bottom here, this small fossa, that is called the coronoid fossa. And then there's a cylinder of bone here. You can see this cylinder of bone. That's called the trochlea. It goes from the coronoid fossa and rolls around and goes into this fossa. This is called the olecranon fossa, that being the trochlea, okay? Come back here. If we go next to the trochlea or lateral to it, this is called the capitulum. And then if we look here, we have epicondyles. Now, the head's on this side, so this is the medial epicondyle. And then over here, we've got lateral epicondyle. Okay, and that takes care of the humerus. We come down, in fact, let's look at the articulation just real quick. We have this ulna that's going to articulate this way. So you see the elbow right there, right? So that's going to articulate and rotate around. So this is an ulna, And this notch is called the trochlear notch, which is going to articulate around that trochlea of the humerus. The top portion here, if we're looking at it this way, is called the olecranon process, and the bottom portion is called the coronoid process. And they go into the individual fossas, right? The olecranon process goes into olecranon fossa, coronoid process into the coronoid fossa, and then again the trochlear notch. If we look on the side here, we have a little notch where the radius is going to articulate with the ulna bone, and this is called the radial notch. If we slide down to the bottom, we've got a pointy process. This is called the styloid process of the ulna. And again, you'll know it's an ulna because you can see a U, right? So that's a giveaway that you're on the ulna bone. If we look at the radius, we also have a styloid process down at the distal end. This is called the styloid process of the radius. If we go to the proximal end, we've got the head of the radius here. Underneath it, we have the neck of the radius. And then this big bump right here, this is called the radial tuberosity of the biceps tendon, is going to insert into that. So we've got radial tuberosity there. Takes care of the radius. We're almost out of the woods. We've got the hand here. And so same thing as far as the phalanges are concerned, and the as far as the metacarpals, we're going to start with the thumb being number 1. So we got first, second, third, fourth, and fifth metacarpal. We only have 2 phalanges for the first digit. So we've got the first proximal phalange, first distal phalange. For 2, 3, 4, and 5, you're going to have a proximal, middle, and distal phalange. Don't forget to label it 2, 3s, 4s, and 5s. Okay. If we come, so these are your, your phalanges. These are your metacarpals. And then we have our carpal bones down here. We're going to look at it from this side so we can see all of them. Because this bone right here called the pisiform sits on top of the triquetrum. So when we turn it this way, posterior, you can't see it. So the anterior view, so again, if we're looking here, right, we're in anatomical position. So the anterior view, you can see all the bones. Now there's a little mnemonic for this. Let's turn it this way. Now you have to start at the proximal row, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then go to the distal row, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, and so here's the mnemonic. Some lovers take positions that they cannot handle. Okay, and so what we have is right here we've got the scaphoid. That's the S. Scaphoid, lunate. Right. Take is triquetrum. Positions that's P. That's pisiform, and then that they cannot handle. We have trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, and hamate. And you can see the hook of hamate right here, so it tells you on hamate. You see that piece of the bone right there? Okay. Now, trapezium, trapezoid could get confused. Put them in alphabetical order. Trapezium, I comes before O, so trapezium comes before trapezoid, and so that'll help you differentiate between those two. Those are the carpal bones, and that takes care of the upper extremity.